We at the Everything Red Deer podcast acknowledge that it is recorded on Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 land, as well as on a historic gathering place of the Métis. We thank the elders and knowledge keepers who remain with us today and those who've gone before us. This acknowledgement is small, but meant nonetheless as an act of reconciliation and gratitude.
Local, credible, now. You're listening to the Everything Red Deer podcast, powered by rdnewsNOW. We talk to the movers, shakers, and newsmakers around Red Deer and Central Alberta, then bring those interviews to you. And now, here's your host, Josh Hall.
Welcome back to the Everything Red Deer podcast. It is episode 9 this week. Thanks so much for joining us once again. My name is Josh Hall. In a moment, we're going to take a moment to talk about the hockey game last night. Not because we make a habit of talking about NHL on this podcast, because this podcast is about everything Red Deer. Although there was a Red Deer connection to the game. But we're going to talk about it just for a moment because of all the factors surrounding it, political and otherwise. But first, I've got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is it's supposed to snow for a few days next week. The good news is that the daytime high, as of today, is supposed to go below zero only on March 4th, and even then, it's just going to be -1. I'm so grateful that we're all out of this deep freeze. Today on the podcast, we are talking to Staff Sergeant Jay Peden, commanding officer of the Sylvan Lake RCMP detachment, about all things related to body-worn cameras. And my interview with him is coming up in just a few moments, so stick with us here. Let's discuss a few things first. Yes, we'll start with the hockey game, okay? Let's take a team deep breath. In and out. That was such a relief last night to see Connor McDavid pot one over the shoulder of Connor Hellebuck in the slot about 8 minutes into overtime against the United States. I will admit I had some skepticism coming into this tournament that the NHL was putting on. Again, the NHL was putting on this tournament. They called it best on best, but I think that deserves a big asterisk because of who was left out, which even Connor McDavid brought up just the other day. His line mate Leon Draisaitl, who is German, is the NHL's leading scorer. And he just wasn't even invited by default. I think the NHL missed an opportunity here to have a Team Europe. I agree we don't really want a repeat of 8 or 9 years ago when they did Team North America and Team Young Stars. I didn't want that. But if we'd had a Team Europe, we could have included some elite players that the league excluded, just because they weren't from any of those 4 nations that did get to play in it. Now, Leon is German. There's also elite players from Switzerland, Latvia, Czechia, and others. And maybe even we could have had some Russians on Team Europe without allowing them to represent the flag. I think I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt to some players in the league that they don't stand for what's been going on. And we could have had them on a Team Europe or a Team World, what have you. 5 nations, you're including all the players who actually deserve to be at a best-on-best tournament without it being the actual Olympics. And who knows what's going to happen with that in a year from now. And as much as Alex Ovechkin is given reason to dislike him, also related to Russia stuff, he is on the precipice of breaking the league's all-time goal-scoring record, and he couldn't be in this tournament because the NHL limited it to the 4 nations. Otherwise, the competition, I'll admit, was incredible and exacerbated, of course, tenfold by the political overtones swirling the continent as we speak. I think for folks like myself who doubted the tournament in advance, the championship being on the line between Canada and the U.S. took on extra meaning on Thursday night simply so Trump and his 51st state nonsense wouldn't get that emotional boost. That was what the exhale was for when Connor McDavid scored, because we never would have heard the end of it. And of course, we may still never hear the end of it, of course, knowing how the president operates, it's never going to happen. Canada's not going to become the 51st state. There's a snowball's chance in hell, as some guy named JT in Ottawa said a couple times recently. But I digress. Let's get back to Red Deer here. Oh, and I was going to say, Brandon Hagel, former Red Deer Rebel, had a bit of a coming out party, I think, in this tournament. So congratulations to him on winning the Four Nations Cup with Team Canada. And the Rebels, you can look up the details on our website. The Rebels are going to have a Brandon Hagel bobblehead night coming up. Speaking of the Red Deer Rebels, last week we mentioned to you that Sockie Day in Red Deer, an initiative of the United Way Central Alberta and the Red Deer Rebels, was happening on their Family Day game. Fans who attended that game last Monday were encouraged to bring new socks to be thrown onto the ice, which would eventually help people in need of some good old foot warmth. And in case you missed the story this week at rdnewsnow.com, a round of applause. I don't have a drop to play, so I'm real clapping. A round of applause because there was a record-breaking 5,138 pairs of socks collected, almost 300 more than last year. That is simply awesome. Well done, Red Deer and Rebels fans. On a similar note, the coldest night of the year walk is happening Saturday night, February 22nd. If you're listening to the podcast the day that it comes out, that's tomorrow, of course. This event benefits the Mustard Seed and the Red Deer Food Bank. Last-minute registrations can be done at cnoy.org. The walk starts around 5 o'clock with some pre-festivities at a Cole Central Middle School. And this is always a great fundraiser. Make sure you give participants a friendly wave or a honk if you see them while you're driving by. Furthermore, if you have not had the chance to catch up on all the latest regarding the evolving provincial alleged scandal involving the Premier and Red Deer North MLA Adriana LaGrange, who is Health Minister, of course, we have coverage on our Alberta page at rdnewsnow.com. Two other little things to tell you about. Around this time of year, the RCMP begins seeking the names from the public for its Name the Puppy contest. Did you know that the puppy training facility is in Innisfail? This year, they're looking for names that start with the letter A. Details about how you can enter a name are at rdnewsnow.com, obviously. And finally, this Monday at 9 a.m., that's February 24th, is the deadline to nominate someone for the Red Deer Mayor's Recognition Awards. More details are at rdnewsnow.com or reddeer.ca. All right, without further ado, a brief interlude, then our conversation with Sylvan Lake RCMP Staff Sergeant Jay Peden. About to join us on the podcast now is Staff Sergeant Jay Peden, commanding officer at Sylvan Lake RCMP for the last 3 years. Jay began his RCMP career in 2001 in Valley View with stops in Olds, Sylvan Lake, and Red Deer before going back to Sylvan as officer in charge. Jay is also a recent recipient of the King Charles III Coronation Medal for exceptional community dedication and unwavering commitment to service. So this January, Sylvan Lake RCMP became the first detachment in central Alberta to have its members utilize body-worn cameras. It was November 2024 when the RCMP began its national deployment of the cameras with the goal of getting them on 1,000 more members each month. That would mean more than 90% of the force across Canada would have a camera attached by November 2025, with full deployment complete by sometime in early to mid-2026. Red Deer and other communities around central Alberta are supposed to get them over the next few months. Lacombe started using body-worn cameras, and of course Lacombe is an independent police service. They started using them last August. So Jay, once again, welcome to the podcast. How about we start with the basics as far as how these devices work?
In January of 2025, last month, the Sylvan Lake Detachment members commenced training for the rollout of the Axon 4 body-worn cameras. Following the training at the detachment, the members were then issued their camera, and once they received that training, it is now a mandatory piece of equipment that we we use in our day-to-day operations and duties. Be in the first detachment in the Red Deer area to have the body-worn cameras rolled out to us, and the training and I guess from there the use of them. We've noticed that there's been value to what's being captured with the videos and the use of them. We arrive to a call. Prior to arriving to the call or engaging for a call for service, the members will activate it. It does provide a 30-second buffer, so it'll capture 30 seconds prior to the moment that they activate it. And so when they're going to calls, depending what the call is for services is, that will determine how long the camera is operating for. Once the file is concluded or the interaction is concluded and there's no more evidentiary value to be gained, the members have that ability to turn it off. The cameras provide insight, I guess, and a view from the officer's perspective of that engagement. It captures it's audio, it captures the video, and then we're able to, that downloads after the fact, once back at the office, and then we can use that for the investigation, obviously. The initial videos that I've viewed and files that I've looked at, it's great. It's a great tool to collect the evidence, to give that perspective of what's happening at the time. Quite often, a lot of situations we go to can be quite emotional or elevated emotionally, and it gives us that clear picture of exactly what's happening. Both parties interacting or the individuals that are there. So our members, their actions, comments, reactions, they're all being recorded. So there's an increased accountability piece on that part, and some transparency, obviously, for the public. Likewise, we are able to capture statements and the recordings of the individuals we interact with. So with that accountability piece, we also know that if there's a public complaint made or that individual feels that something was done wrong, we have that ability to go back, review it, and assess exactly what happened, and if it was in line with our obligations, our policies, procedures, the law, then we can comment on that. Now we have that perspective, almost like a real-time perspective when we're looking at it versus after the fact, when everyone's like, okay, well, the member said this or the public said this, and what actually was said and in the context it was said.
I appreciate you mentioning about how it's actually helpful for just regular citizens who are the ones being responded to, because I think some people might have the idea that this is going to be like some big invasion of privacy or something, but it's actually going to be a benefit to them, depending on the circumstances, obviously. It could be a detriment to them too, but that's only if they've done something bad. Not to get into specific cases, but this could be helpful for ACERT as well, when they're trying to figure out the actual circumstances of something. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly.
Without you speaking on their behalf.
On their behalf. What it will do is it will provide evidence and context of police and public interactions. So in the case of a use of force event, then if it's deemed to be in scope for ACERT to take the investigation on, they will have that video, they'll have that understanding of what led up to the situation, what was presented, what the reaction was. Were the members in the scope of their duties? Was the use of force, was that threshold proper? Even injury, when someone's arrested, there could be a little bit of a struggle and there's injury caused. It will provide insight as to what the mechanism of injury was, or if it wasn't excessive force, and then that ACERT would have that.
Something I'm hoping you could speak to is what happens if an officer forgets. But I think I read that it's actually a requirement in whatever RCMP policy. They have to turn it on. So it's part of their training that when you go to a scene, you have to turn it on. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's required. Then once again, if it's an interaction where it's not required, they can deactivate it, or you're going to that call for service, you're going to activate it. So when you're there, it's running, and then once that investigation is done, you can turn it off.
How does one judge whether it's necessary to have it on or not when something could always escalate, even if it seems calm at a particular moment?
For instance, Josh, you and I are in the public and we're having a conversation. I'm not going to turn it on. Or if you said, hey, I just want to talk to you, I'm probably not going to turn it on. But if I'm dispatched to a call, then of course I'm going to turn it on. I'm obligated to turn it on. Or I'm interacting with somebody and things kind of escalate, or they're going in that direction. I can then activate it so it's recording.
What about traffic stops?
Traffic stops, once again, that's an interaction. You're conducting an enforcement piece, so therefore you are going to activate it for that traffic interaction. You may not get the offense itself on the camera, but when you're engaging with the driver of the vehicle or occupants of the vehicle, then that will be a situation where you have it running, recording, and then once you're done, you turn it off.
So clearly there's a lot to be optimistic about in terms of what these body cameras can offer in terms of benefits to people. Are there any anticipated challenges?
I think with everything, with something new and technology being rolled out, there's going to be obviously some hiccups. Getting members used to that muscle memory of, oh yeah, I got to turn the camera on. That's one piece that, until you're used to it, it's still new to you, right? You get into that routine. The muscle memory obviously helps you do that. The challenges that can also be, I guess, come out of this is just the overwhelming amount of video that needs to be redacted, to protect people's privacies, personal information. But with the cameras, there's also a program, it's called Digital Evidence Management System, which that's where the footage will upload to, and then there's software in that to then do the redaction of the video. With that being said, everyone worries about video being falsified or cut to take stuff out of it. It's actually got a built-in system that tracks all access, all actions for that video. So it'll tell you who was in it, what time they were in it. It'll tell you what they did to it, if they clipped the video, redacted the video, applied something to that video. So it's, for the quality assurance, and I guess it's like an audit of everything that's happening, and we have access to that as well. So if there's concerns about something being doctored, I guess, or clips taken out, it's all recorded. It's every keystroke that way, or not keystroke, but every access and action is recorded, and we have a printout of who's done what. With the technology of the Axon cameras that we are being issued, that the RCMP is supplying, there are other municipal police forces that do use them. There are community peace officer programs that do use them. And one of the great things about them is if the cameras are activated and you're at a call for service, interagency, doesn't matter, they will link. If you're within, I think, 10 or 10 meters of each other, and they're activated, they'll actually sync. And so they will link to the same file. And so then after the fact, when they're uploaded, we're able to monitor, review the footage, and we can actually get the multiple angles.
It sounds like they, didn't really spare much expense in going for the most state-of-the-art technology for these things.
Yeah, and it's like you said, there are other police forces using them, and so there is a history of the reliability. Part of the study and the pilot project the RCMP undertook also saw successes. Therefore, that's what would lead to procurement of them once they're field tested and they know the reliability and it meets all the obligations and requirements. Then that's how they'll end up going for the purchase or the use of them. So
So until now, I think maybe it'd be fair to say that everybody's really lucky if we ever get video of an incident that's, between RCMP and whomever. Now there's theoretically going to be video for every interaction. Is this cause for RCMP to have to hire somebody who's dedicated to like going through all these videos for every investigation, or has there been extra or new training that's being done to get people in the know about how to go through video efficiently and not waste time? And
all members will have access to their video, and they'll have the ability to go through it to determine what needs to be redacted for it to be disclosed. From there, supervisors will have access to the video as well for quality assurance, to make sure it's being used, to maybe if they're reviewing an incident, you'll be able to go in and see that. And then from there, there are obviously users in the RCMP in Alberta K Division here that will also be able to assist with the redaction, depending on how complex it may be. Quite often, majority of our interactions will be a little less complex, like traffic stop for one, and then we're able to solicit the assistance from that unit to help us out for some of those files too. So
we can talk about all the pros and cons, and that's great. But I was wondering, are members actually happy that they have to now do this? How do they feel comfortable wearing them, do you find?
I think always there's going to be some misnomers or information that isn't accurate, and some of those pieces we've heard. However, they're quickly dispelled about, like the recording after the fact. It's always filming or recording. Well, that's not the case. It's not activated for the RCMP, so that's kind of taken some of that away, those concerns. Like anything, it's change, but it brings us forward. Technology's out there. Everyone has cameras. Everyone has cell phones. It's just another tool for us to be able to ensure that accountability piece is met, to ensure that there's transparency, the interactions between the public and the police. You look over the course of policing in the last 10, 15 years, when something new comes out, it's a conversation piece. So with the cameras now, once again, it's a conversation piece. So the general public might notice them, and they'll come ask about them, and it gives us a chance to engage in a positive manner.
That was our talk with Jay Peden, Staff Sergeant at Sylvan Lake RCMP. If you, as a member of the public, would like to give the RCMP some feedback on what they're doing with body-worn cameras, good or bad, you can go to rcmp-grc.ca/en/body-worn-cameras. That link is in the podcast description, and you can also find the written edition of our story with Staff Sergeant Peden at rdnewsnow.com. Thanks so much to Jay for coming on to share his insights on body-worn cameras. Until next time, I've been Josh Hall. Thanks for listening.
This has been the Everything Red Deer podcast, powered by RD News Now. This podcast is produced and edited by the team at RD News Now and Pattison Media Red Deer. Make sure to download our mobile app and subscribe to our free daily newsletter by visiting rdnewsnow.com. Thanks for listening.